For centuries, the words of vanished civilizations lay in silence, burned, buried, or deliberately erased. Now, artificial intelligence has begun to break that silence, and what it found is not the peaceful wisdom many hoped for. Instead, the decoded fragments speak of fire, collapse, and voices forced into quietude. Among the discoveries stands one name, Philodemus, the philosopher whose lost scroll, hidden beneath volcanic ash, returned with a message darker than anyone imagined. The scroll, rescued from fire. In the year 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted with unimaginable force. Pompeii became the symbol of frozen death, but nearby Herculaneum held a secret that would outlive the disaster. Inside a villa, a library of papyrus scrolls was instantly carbonized, transformed into fragile black cylinders. For nearly 2,000 years, these texts were untouchable, destroyed the moment anyone tried to open them. Generations of scholars accepted that their words had been lost forever. Then, in 2023, the Vesuvius Challenge was launched by Nat Friedman and Brent Seals, offering a prize of more than $1 million to anyone who could recover text from these sealed relics without destroying them. Using micro-CT scanning, every layer of the scroll was captured, and AI models were trained to detect faint traces of ink hidden inside carbon. In October 2023, a young student named Luke Ferrator achieved what centuries of human effort could not. He identified the Greek word porphyros, meaning purple, a color of wealth and power. It was the first word read inside one of the scrolls in nearly 2 millennia, and it earned him $50,000. Soon after, researchers Youssef Nader and Julian Schilliger joined the effort, and by early 2024, more than 2,000 Greek letters had been reconstructed. These fragments revealed a philosophical text by Philodemus, a disciple of the Epicurean school. At first, scholars were fascinated by its themes: pleasure, mortality, freedom from divine punishment. But as the AI pushed deeper, darker notes began to emerge. Passages hinted at a cycle of fire and silence, at rulers who maintained order through strategic quietude. One chilling fragment described a moment when the light goes out and the cleansing begins. To some, these words were poetic metaphors. To others, they felt like warnings written centuries before the eruption that destroyed the library. And as more lines appeared, the tragic irony grew sharper. A philosopher writing of collapse, whose words were buried by fire, only to be resurrected by machines nearly 2,000 years later. Babylon's broken tablets reborn. Long before the ashes of Herculaneum, another silence fell over Mesopotamia. The cradle of civilization, home to Babylon and its kings, produced thousands of clay tablets inscribed in Akkadian cuneiform. Many were shattered by time, eroded by floods, or left incomplete. For centuries, scholars pieced fragments together slowly, each translation taking months or even years. The gaps remained like wounds, entire passages of law, myth, and prophecy left missing. But in the last few years, artificial intelligence has begun to stitch those wounds closed. Using recurrent neural networks, researchers trained algorithms on vast collections of Akkadian texts. These models were not reading in the human sense, they were predicting. By analyzing grammar, structure, and thousands of known phrases, the AI could reconstruct missing lines with uncanny accuracy. A tablet once thought to hold only fragments of the Epic of Gilgamesh suddenly revealed whole verses. Legal codes, cracked and incomplete for centuries, began to form complete laws. For the first time in millennia, Babylon's voice grew louder. Yet what emerged was not only epic poetry or mundane trade records. Some restored lines spoke of an ancient flood before the flood, a memory buried beneath myth. Others contained ritual instructions for warding off celestial events described as omens of destruction. There were hints of forbidden practices, ceremonies meant to shield rulers from the wrath of the gods, or perhaps from their own people. Scholars called it digital archaeology, but the words themselves carried a heavier weight. To hold in your hands a broken tablet, once silent, now speaking through the mind of a machine, was both miraculous and unnerving. Were these merely religious formulas, or were they memories of disasters endured by Babylon's people? The AI could not answer. It only provided words. Interpretation remained human, and humans disagreed. Some saw history, others prophecy. But everyone felt the tragedy. That a language so carefully carved into clay, designed to last forever, still fell silent, until technology forced it back to life. And in that resurrection, it carried not comfort, but unease. The Dead Sea Scrolls and the Hidden Hands. In 1947, shepherds stumbled upon caves near Qumran, overlooking the Dead Sea. Inside lay fragments of scrolls older than Christianity itself, writings that would become some of the most studied and most controversial texts in human history. For decades, scholars struggled to piece them together, but the fragments were too many, the handwriting too fragile, the meanings often contested. The mystery endured. Who wrote these scrolls, and why? In 2021, artificial intelligence offered a haunting answer. Using high-resolution scans of the Great Isaiah Scroll, researchers trained pattern recognition systems to study the strokes of ink, down to the tiniest curves invisible to the human eye. What they discovered shocked the academic world. The scroll was not the work of a single hand, as had long been believed, but of at least two different scribes. Their handwriting was nearly identical, but AI revealed subtle shifts, a change in pressure here, a curve just slightly different there. This finding transformed the story of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Instead of lone prophets or hermits recording divine messages, there may have been organized scribal teams working together to preserve or conceal knowledge. The scrolls, once seen as spiritual relics, now appeared as products of collective effort under extraordinary circumstances. More unsettling was what AI found in the variations. Subtle differences in style hinted at changes in mood, in urgency, even in secrecy. Were these scribes passing coded warnings? Were they embedding dissent under the guise of scripture? Scholars began to wonder if some scrolls were not simply religious manuals, but survival guides, hidden philosophies, or even protest texts against rulers who demanded silence. The Dead Sea had been mute for centuries, its scrolls gathering dust and controversy. Now they were speaking again, but what they said carried a weight of tragedy. Voices that had been silenced for 2 millennia emerged through algorithms, whispering of division, danger, and resistance. In every line there was the echo of men who wrote in fear, fear that their words would vanish, fear that their truths would never be heard. AI has given them a voice again, but what they say leaves us uneasy. Survival often meant writing in shadows. Bones that spoke of plague and silence. Centuries before Rome rose or Babylon fell, the Shang dynasty in ancient China carved its fears into bone. Ox scapulae and turtle shells were inscribed with questions for the gods, known today as oracle bones. Heated until they cracked, the fractures were read as divine answers. These were not stories or poetry. They were desperate petitions. Will the harvest fail? Will a plague strike this season? Will the sacrifice be accepted? For generations, scholars attempted to connect these symbols to modern Chinese characters, a task so complex it demanded lifetimes of work. But in 2024, artificial intelligence accelerated the process beyond human ability. By digitizing thousands of glyphs and training models on their patterns, researchers built systems that could match ancient symbols to their modern descendants with unprecedented accuracy. Suddenly, fragments that had been dismissed as meaningless scratches revealed full words, sentences, and chilling themes. What emerged was more than ritual. The AI revealed patterns of repetition, warnings about disease returning in cycles, references to fires from the sky, notes on when rulers should remain silent. These were not just superstitions, but a record of crises endured by one of the world's earliest civilizations. The bones became voices, carrying the weight of fear and power across 3,000 years. Tragically, what struck scholars was the similarity to our own age. The questions were timeless, almost painfully familiar. How to survive disaster? How to prevent famine? How to avoid silence imposed by rulers when people cried out for answers? The oracle bones no longer felt like relics of a forgotten religion. They felt like evidence of a human struggle that has never truly ended. AI gave clarity to words carved in desperation by hands long turned to dust, and yet the clarity brought no comfort. It only reminded us that across time, civilizations have asked the same haunting questions, and often received no answer but silence. The bones cracked open by fire centuries ago speak again today, but their message is heavy with sorrow. Humanity has always lived under the shadow of disaster. The Mayan glyphs and the Great Thirsting. In the jungles of Central America, stone temples and carved monuments once held the pride of the Maya. Their glyphs, intricate symbols stacked in elaborate squares, were among the most complex writing systems ever devised. For centuries, they were unreadable to outsiders, dismissed as decorative art rather than language. Only in recent decades did breakthroughs in linguistics begin to untangle their meaning, but it was artificial intelligence that pushed the work into darker territory. By training algorithms to segment glyphs from damaged monuments and faded codices, researchers gave machines the ability to separate the symbols with precision no human hand could match. Suddenly, texts that had seemed like broken mosaics revealed structure, sentences, and recurring patterns. And with that clarity came tragedy. Across different cities, inscriptions told of collapse, dynasties falling, rulers betrayed, and years of famine. One phrase appearing again and again chilled scholars: the Great Thirsting. These words described not just ordinary drought, but something prolonged and devastating. Glyphs linked the thirsting with celestial alignments, with rituals of blood, with pleas to the gods to balance the sky and calm the earth. Some historians believe these were metaphors. Others argue they were records of actual disasters, times when the rains failed, crops withered, and the people turned to sacrifice to restore order. AI made the repetition undeniable. Patterns across multiple cities, far from one another, all marked the same years with the same words. This was not coincidence. It was a civilization documenting its own slow collapse, written in stone and hidden beneath vines for centuries. The Maya did not only chart their rulers and their wars, they recorded their despair. To read these glyphs today is to witness the sorrow of a people who saw disaster coming yet could not stop it. Their prayers were carved deep into stone, hoping the gods would listen. But the cities fell silent, abandoned, their voices buried under jungle soil. Now machines have resurrected those voices, and what they tell us is tragic: that even the greatest empires can be undone by thirst, betrayal, and silence. The scripts that refused to die. Not every lost language has yielded to human patience, but artificial intelligence is beginning to push open even the most tightly sealed doors. Among the most haunting mysteries is the Proto-Elamite script, carved into clay tablets more than 5,000 years ago in what is now Iran. For generations, scholars stared at its strange shapes, unable to link them to any known language. There was no Rosetta Stone, no parallel translation, only symbols frozen in silence. In recent years, researchers began training deep learning models on thousands of images of these tablets. The algorithms searched for repetition, for rhythm in the chaos, for clusters of signs that might represent numbers, names, or rituals. Slowly, faint outlines of grammar emerged. For the first time, it seemed clear. This was not random decoration, but the voice of a civilization we barely knew existed. Then there is the Voynich manuscript, discovered in an Italian monastery in the early 20th century. Its looping script and bizarre illustrations defied every attempt at translation. Some called it a hoax, others a lost language. In 2018, an AI model suggested it might be a coded form of Hebrew with stripped vowels and rearranged grammar. The translations were unsettling. Phrases about women, baths, herbs, and secret recommendations, as if the book contained forbidden medical knowledge, deliberately hidden from the eyes of men. Taken together, these cases show a tragic pattern. Languages do not vanish by accident. Often, they are buried because of what they say. Warnings of collapse, rituals of survival, voices excluded from power. And now, as machines pull them into the light, we are faced with words that may not have been meant for us. That is the irony. The past tried to hide them, but the future insists on reading them. The tragedy is not only in the civilizations that vanished, but in what their words reveal, that fear, silence, and collapse are cycles humanity has never escaped. AI has broken the seals, but it cannot soften the message. The dead scripts are alive again, and what they whisper is not hope, but warning. From the ashes of Vesuvius to the deserts of Iran, from the bones of Shang kings to the whispers of forgotten women, artificial intelligence has dragged hidden voices back into the present. What should have been silent forever now speaks again, and the words they carry are heavy with sorrow. Fire, famine, betrayal, silence. These messages are not stories of triumph, but reminders of how fragile every civilization truly is. But what do you think? Are these discoveries warnings meant for us, or simply echoes of fears long past? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep the conversation alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss our next deep dive into history's darkest secrets.